further, hit like, subscribe, tap that bell, and share. Before we get into today's topic, I want to share a post. It said, dating someone who understands your mental health is so important. There's people who will make you feel terrible for things you can't or don't know how to control yet. And I think that it's not only important to date someone who understands your mental health, but any relationship you decide to develop, even in friendships. I think that it's important that those people understand your mental health is important. So that leads me to the topic, understanding your diagnosis. So some people with mental health conditions experience relief and hope when they get a diagnosis. Others may feel like a diagnosis is just words. You may even feel several competing emotions at the same time. Relief at having a name for things bothering you, but fear and anger that you have an illness. You may feel that the diagnosis you receive carries negative or damaging perceptions and may not want to accept it, but getting a diagnosis is a useful step in receiving effective treatment and improving your quality of life. Unlike diabetes or cancer, there's no medical test that can provide a diagnosis of mental illness. A healthcare professional can do a number of things, an evaluation including a physical exam and a long-term monitoring to rule out any underlying medical conditions that may be causing symptoms. Once other medical conditions are ruled out, a person might be referred to a mental health professional that will use a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, to make a diagnosis. The DSM-5, published by the American Psychiatric Association, lists criteria including feelings, symptoms, and behaviors over a period of time that a person must meet in order to be officially diagnosed with the illness. And before I go into why diagnosis is important, just to kind of share at the beginning here, I had said some people with mental health conditions experience relief and hope when they get a diagnosis, and others feel it's just words. I felt both of these when I very first got one 12 years ago, 13 years ago maybe. It was just words. Getting it 2 years ago, it was a relief and hope. And I think the difference a lot in there was, before it was just like, oh, okay, that's what's wrong. And I began to use it as an excuse for my behavior. Whereas 2 years ago, it's like, okay, that's what it is. Now what do I need to do? So moving into the topic of why diagnosis matters. A medical professional determines a diagnosis by interviewing you about your history of symptoms. Sometimes a doctor will require a couple of medical tests to rule out possible physical ailments, but we cannot evaluate mental health itself through blood tests or other biometric data. Instead, doctors use their experience to determine how your set of systems fit into what we know about mental health. The diagnosis is an important tool for you and your doctor. Doctors and therapists use the diagnosis to advise you on treatment, option, and future health risks. And I've said this before, important part here is they advise you. They don't tell you this is what it's going to be and this is what you must do and have to do. They advise you on your options. And by them advising your options, that means you have options. Another reason a diagnosis matters is that it tells health insurance companies that you have a condition requiring medical care. A doctor's diagnosis is also necessary to qualify for Social Security disability support or for job protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Even though labeling your symptoms does not automatically relieve them, congratulate yourself on having moved forward in the process of getting treatment and protecting your rights. I think it's an important piece there because so many people are afraid to even go and see a doctor or see a therapist and seek that help for the simple fact that they'll get labeled. But for those of you that, have taken that step, again, congratulate yourself on moving forward in the process of getting treatment. So what's next? You may already have learned as much as possible about mental illness, or you may be facing the topic for the first time. In either case, a diagnosis is a starting point for learning more. When your doctors talk about your condition, take notes so you can look up your diagnosis later. And nowadays, most doctors have you leave with a sheet indicating your diagnosis and whatever they discussed and went over with you. But in the event that they don't, it's good to take notes. Ask your doctor to recommend books and websites with additional information. When you read about your condition, you find your symptoms match in some ways and don't match in others, and this is normal. Focus on learning about symptoms and treatments. You may come across discouraging predictions about how it's impossible to cure serious mental illness. However, with treatment, you can reduce or eliminate your symptoms. A diagnosis is a gateway to good treatment, not a sentence to lifetime imprisonment. I'm going to say that one more time. A diagnosis is a gateway to good treatment, not a sentence to a lifetime imprisonment. If you haven't already found a support group, this is a good time to reach out to others with your condition. Peer-to-peer classes and discussions groups can provide encouragement and advice from people who are living well with mental illnesses. So, what if you disagree with your diagnosis? After reading about your condition, you may have questions for your doctor. How do your symptoms match the diagnosis rather than the other? Could it be something else? What if it's a physical illness instead, or a misunderstanding? It's important to feel that your doctor considered all the possibilities. If you disagree with your doctor's evaluation, however, don't automatically quit working with him or her if your doctor's already familiar with your symptoms, and the diagnosis is simply a tool to help you and your doctor address those symptoms. If possible, it's worth it to stick with a doctor who already knows you. Ask yourself if you can work with this doctor, not if you believe in this diagnosis. When you discuss your concerns, does your doctor listen to you? Try to answer your questions. Does your doctor show sympathy? Understand your goals? What treatment does the doctor recommend for helping you meet those goals? Consider whether you can agree to disagree about the exact diagnosis, while agreeing to try out the doctor's recommendations for a certain period of time. Reevaluating a diagnosis. A diagnosis is only as good as the treatment it leads to. Whether or not you feel confident in your diagnosis, it's important to reevaluate occasionally. After pursuing treatment for a time, you and your doctor should meet to discuss your progress. Consider how treatment is helping your condition, or if it doesn't seem to be helping. If treatment isn't sufficient, other options for treatment can be considered or changing your diagnosis. A mental health professional makes the best diagnosis possible with information they have. I think right there, that's very important, with that a mental health professional makes the best diagnosis possible with the information they have. Here it's important to be honest. Be honest with your doctor, because that's the basis of your diagnosis, is the information that they have. So you have to be honest. Over time, as you work together, he or she will observe you, listen to you, and gather new information to help refine your diagnosis. Your diagnosis is the beginning of an investigation into how to make your life better. And I thought it was very important to share that for people who are just coming to know their, diagnosis, because it's kind of the start of the journey once you are diagnosed. And I've taken, full responsibility of educating myself on not just relying on my doctor, but also educating those around me, especially those that I'm close to, my friends, my loved ones, because I can't expect them to understand me if I don't communicate to them and tell them about me and my diagnosis and my mental illness. So it's an important part of the process of your healing is to understand, your diagnosis, and to, take a step further and, help others to understand so that they can be a best support to you. I hope you enjoyed the content. Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe, hit that bell so you can get notified every time a new video drops, and share. Thank you.